Focus Today. I'm your host, Perry Atkinson. Of course, we have a lot of signals down into the California area. I'm born and raised in Sacramento, pretty much familiar with what's going on down there, but California seems to be in trouble. I'm very honored to have with us today Christopher Moritz. He's the author of Failed State, a portrait of California in the twilight of empire, a corporate attorney. He's an investment researcher and an M&A executive, a third-generation Santa Monican, and he grew up in the heart of Southern California and resides in the same home his grandparents built in 1950. Wow. Anyway, there's a picture of the cover of his book called Failed State, and he does have a website, Chris Moritz, MORITZ.com, and there's the picture of that landing page. Christopher, good to see you. How are you, friend?
Good to see you. Good morning.
Thank you for your time. Wow, what made you take this on?
So in 2023, I was victimized by this crime wave that we hear all about, and you really don't understand it until it's literally in your home. And so on one weekend in September 2023, I was home invaded 2 nights in a row by an MS-13 illegal alien gangster who had been deported by President Trump and came back into the country under Biden, committed dozens of these types of hot prowl or home invasion style robberies all over Southern California. In LA County, he was not charged for a single one of these crimes because under then DA George Gascon, crime is simply unpunished. There is no justice, especially for anything deemed to be a property crime. So ultimately, he was only sentenced up in Ventura County for 2 counts of these types of crimes and received a sentence of 2 years and a $300 fine. I'm sure he'll serve less than that. So when I learned about the details of this case, which included some really shocking kind of facts besides his profile, which in and of itself, sorry, my cat, which in and of itself is unusual. It underscored, I think, all of the problems that we're seeing in the state. A crime gone rampant, a justice system that seems to be designed for the criminals instead of for citizens, a completely chaotic border, an invasion, really, facilitated by our own government. So I realized that I had to write about this. I had to just learn about it for my own sanity. And as I dug into this, it became clear that there was a story because it was much, much darker than even far darker than the details of my own crime. So when the first prosecutor that I talked to about this story, I described to her what I just told you now. And she said, what's so remarkable about your story is that it's so relatable. And I stopped her and I said, relatable? How could this be in any way relatable? And from there, we began this journey that led me to believe that California is not just a troubled state, it's a failed state.
So, Chris, a couple questions come out of this. How did it happen, and was it intentional?
Intentional, like as if I was targeted?
No, the state's failure. I mean.
Pardon me.
Yeah.
Yes, I believe it was. I believe it was by design. In fact, and this happened. This journey of California's descent is one that I believe starts around 2010 with the Supreme Court case called Brown v. Plata. And Brown v. Plata ruled that California's state prisons, were, because of their overcapacity, in violation of the 8th Amendment, cruel and unusual punishment. So at the time, California state prisons were 200% capacity. And the Supreme Court, with a decision led by Justice Kennedy, found that they had to come down to 167.9, a very kind of arbitrary number. So the state had to conform to this federal mandate. And this was a time of Jerry Brown, kind of the end of Jerry Brown's governorship. But it was also the rise of Kamala Harris and some of these other characters that are instrumental to this sad story. But as California tried to reconcile with the Supreme Court's decisions, we adopted a number of laws that were meant to, quote, address the crisis of mass incarceration. So on the one hand, the Supreme Court said we had to do this. But on the other hand, we have forces coming from academia and the let's call it the institutional philanthropic NGO world. And they had been this criminal justice reform movement coming from that wing had been pushing for some kind of de-incarceration for many years. So this was sort of the catalyst, this case. And it began a journey in the legislature with a bill called AB 109. And AB 109 moved 27,000 nonviolent offenders from state prison to local county jails. But the trick to AB 109 was that the way it classified nonviolent offender. And this is something we'll see again and again, the manipulation of language by Sacramento to the detriment of the safety of the people of California. So nonviolent offender under AB 109 meant the last crime for which you were charged, not your entire criminal history. So you had violent offenders with violent track records, but their last crime was maybe a drug offense, and they would be sent to county jails, 27,000. Now, the county jails do not have the capacity to take on this load of prisoners. So many of these people were simply being re-released, and the recidivism rate, I think, was 60% were rearrested within 3 years, and 40% or 44% were convicted. From there, we go on to laws like that. I'm sure your audience has probably heard of Prop 47, which is the law that basically legalized stealing under $950. It would reduce from a felony to a misdemeanor, and misdemeanors were simply not prosecuted under DAs in jurisdictions like Los Angeles and San Francisco. So Prop 47 was, again, another attempt to try and reduce prison populations, but it was through manipulation of language. And it was actually this bill which was so destructive, and I'll tell you just how destructive in a moment, but it was called the Safe Neighborhoods and Schools Act on the ballot. Nothing to do with that. It's the opposite. Kamala Harris actually wrote the language as it appeared on the ballot. She left out the fact that people arrested under this new concept of theft, they'd be arrested and released, but they would not get automatically swabbed for DNA. This was omitted from the language of the ballot. And of course, DNA swabs are incredibly potent and powerful towards averting much more serious crimes, because as we know, a small percentage of the population commits a majority of the crime. The Sacramento Bee actually called Kamala Harris out on this for this omission because it was such a, it was hiding really the truth of the law. Now, in the 10 years following 47, shoplifting went up 115% in the state. We now, fast forward, I'll skip some of the other bills, but we get to a point where in 2023, which is when I wrote the book, you are more likely to get robbed, beaten, carjacked, assaulted, and burglarized in California than any other state by double.
Wow. Let me ask you this. This information is staggering. Do you think the citizens in California are waking up to the point of rejecting this judicial insanity?
So here's a depressing statistic. 60% of Californians voted for Prop 47. In the 1990s, 72% of Californians supported three strikes, right? So three strikes was the very famous, very strict law by which you, on your third serious felony, you would get 25 years to life. And it was a progression of sentencing. But it really set the standard for bringing to heel the drug wars of the 1990s and made California a very, very safe place. But we went from that in 1994 to 2014 under Prop 47, and 60% of the population voted, as Tucker Carlson, my friend, said, to commit civilizational suicide. Why? I think it has to do again with the manipulation of language by the powers and moneyed powers, especially from institutions pushing these kinds of policies, like Stanford in particular. But I do think there are glimmers of some course correction. So in this last election cycle, George Gascon, who in my view is an anarchist, I call him such, actually an arsonist in my book. But he was thrown out and in place with a moderate DA, Nathan Hochman, and I think it was like it was extraordinary margin. It might have been 70%. It was incredible. And we also passed Prop 33, despite Gavin Newsom campaigning against it. And Prop 33 was to unwind a lot of the bad stuff from Prop 47. So, look, I think every society that hasn't completely lost its mind at certain point, like, realizes that the crime in this case has touched everyone. I don't know a single person in Los Angeles that has not been affected by crime. My lawyer 3 days ago his car was robbed in the middle of the day. Joaquin Phoenix's car was was stolen 2 days ago. It's everyone. It is literally everyone. So I do think, like, people have had enough, but I also would have thought that the fires would have been a catalyst for dramatic change, and I'm not seeing that.
Okay, I want to talk to you about that. Let me take a quick book. Let me say, folks, check out Chris's book called Failed State, A Portrait of California in the Twilight of Empire. There it is right there. This is amazing. He does have a website, Chris Moritz, MORITZ.com. There's a picture of the landing page. We'll take a quick break. We'll come right back. Welcome back. Such an honor to have with us today Christopher Moritz. He's the author of a fascinating book. And when books are written from experience, I have to tell you, this is a must-read. Failed State, A Portrait of California in the Twilight of Empire. He's also a corporate attorney, an investment researcher. He's the third generation from Santa Monica there. He grew up in the heart of Southern California, resides there in the same home his grandparents built in the 1950s. We're talking about a lot of things and how California is failing. The crime rate is through the roof. I mean, it just seems like to me, Chris, and I'm from there. I'm born and raised in Sacramento, so I'm very familiar with all that. But it just seems like you're living in a glorified anarchy condition.
Yeah. No, I think that it's been glossed over, right? We live in a one-party state. Okay, so I actually used to live in China for 2 years. I was an investment banker in China. So, which, by the way, is crime-free. just a side note. But what you learn about a one-party state is the absence of responsibility and the gaslighting of the people. And that's exactly what's happening in California. We're told by Sacramento, we're told by Gavin Newsom, we're told by institutions that this is not happening, right? We're told that there isn't, that the homeless crisis is being addressed, that Los Angeles spends $2 billion on a bond to try and address the homeless issue, and to ignore the fact that homelessness is up 34% in the last 2 years. There's 75,000 homeless in Los Angeles alone. There's 200,000 gang members in California, another 100,000 in the prisons. It's a gang state. It's controlled actually by the Mexican drug cartels. That was one of the darker things that I learned about this criminal economy in the course of my book. And the way that we got there is rather interesting as well. Sometime around the late 2000s, the Sinaloa and Jalisco cartels moved into Southern California through proxies, which are their Latino gangs, and the Latino gangs dominate every other gang in the state by, I think, 60%. And the cartels told legacy black gangs, Bloods and Crips primarily, that controlled the dope trade, that if we catch you selling drugs outside of our permission and in our territory, we will cut your head off. And they meant it literally. So black gangs got the message very fast, and the black gangs moved into other areas of crime that were safer, primarily retail theft and residential burglaries. So all of these giant smash and grab flash mobs that hit in Nordstrom's that I'm sure you've seen awful video of, that is not random desperate people. It is not Les Miserables, okay? It is actually organized crime.
So I'm going to run out of time, so let me ask you a bunch of quick questions here. Why wasn't the fires in Southern California have a bigger impact on the problem?
I don't know. Honestly, I live right next to the Palisades. The Palisades does not exist anymore. Okay. My neighborhood is basically a continuation of the Palisades. I live in North Santa Monica. I was a block away from the evacuation zone. During the fires, during the first 2 days, my neighborhood was a war zone. And not because of the fires, but because 150 dangerous, armed gangsters from the inner city came into Santa Monica to loot and pillage, and they did so for 2 days. The police, Santa Monica police, arrested 44 people. The local press barely covered this. The violence was so bad and the anarchy was so great. I was told, and I read this in a classified LA County Sheriff report, that there was an Army Reserve base in Tustin, which is in the area in Southern California, part of the fire-affected area, and it was actually raided by unknown perpetrators who made off with 3 Humvees, machine gun turrets, bayonets, night vision goggles, and a whole armory of military grade weaponry. So this is going on. The rioting is going on. The Palisades looks like Hiroshima, and there's only been 3 permits issued for rebuilding in the Palisades to date.
Is it true, Chris, that California is within about 45 days of bankruptcy?
Well, our budget deficit this year was $68 billion. I mean, I think they got it down to a few billion. I think they got it down to 2 or 3. But you know how they did that? they cut like $80 million from fire preparedness.
So Gavin Newsom, he's done with his term at the end of this term. California has an exiting program that is amazing. What we don't hear in the news is how many people are leaving. I have family members that are leaving. I have corporations that have picked up and left, Tesla probably being one of the biggest ones. Sooner or later, this hits the wall. I mean, sooner or later, reality hits. Is there a crack in the windshield here?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, 6 million people have left in the last 10 years. I think it's a net loss of about 2 million. Maybe less than that, but it's still an enormous number of people. And the people moving in are not exactly replacing the people moving out in terms of GDP contribution, right? 27% of California is foreign born. It's the highest in the entire nation. So that's been a big part of the perpetuation of the one party system. I call it demographic engineering. It's exactly what the Biden administration tried to do to the entire country. I think that Gavin Newsom is well positioned to run for president. I think he plans on doing that. He's a talented and charismatic politician. He'll lie without, missing a beat. But I don't know. I mean, I call it failed state for a reason. And I think that the only hope is that we would be able to elect some sort of moderate businessman to Sacramento, to the governorship. But even then, the legislature has been controlled as supermajorities by the Democrats, extreme like progressive wing of it, for 27 years. So, even if you have a great governor, as long as you have that legislature in directing these kind of mad policies, I don't see how we get around that. But look, it's got to start at the local level. You've got to fix up the big cities. You've got to deal with the crime problem. That we are bleeding out. We're bleeding out, and you have to first stop the crime. And then we can try and fix the rest if it's even salvageable. But look, sometimes civilizations do commit suicide. My book is not just about California. It's about, I call it Twilight of Empire, because I look through examples of other civilizations, because we always hear California is a country unto itself, of civilizations that just peter out, and why. And a lot of times it has to do with the breakdown of law and order and the fracture of the social contract. And that's exactly what has happened here.
Okay, so if you take the crime rate and you couple that with the mismanagement of money and finances and budgets, you have bankruptcy. And you've already seen it in the state. Stockton, I think, was the first town that kind of went through that.
Yeah.
And when you have municipalities literally declaring bankruptcy within a state that's 40, 50 days away from bankruptcy, it seems to me, and I'm not trying to be negative or cynical here, but you cannot afford to stay on this road.
You know what their method has been to drive out the middle class. Okay, so they've done that for political hegemony. That's not only been because of policies, although, I mean, arguably it's all policies. And the way I would say I frame this is that when aerospace and defense manufacturing left Southern California, Los Angeles County became blue. And the center of power shifted to Northern California, to San Francisco, and to Silicon Valley, of course, which is in union with the San Francisco political elite, which run the entire state. Now, as you probably just heard, California was named the fourth largest economy in the world by nominal GDP. And that's been being touted by Newsom as evidence that we are doing better than ever. Well, no, 34% of the state is on social welfare. We have the highest poverty rate in the entire nation. And you're increasingly getting a political economy that is a a very small, very, very wealthy elite, and then an underclass that served them. And so this is inherently an unstable it's an unstable situation, right? It is a Latin America style political economy. The difference between the top 10% of earners, which by the way, you have to make like $600,000 a year or more to be in that, and the bottom 30%, which make $17,000 a year, is 67 times.
You're fascinating. Can I get you back? This went very fast.
Oh, I'd be delighted.
I just really think what's so important here, Chris, is that people hear this, and I'm hoping Californians will understand, don't give up. They need to fight against this. All these things that you shared with us have to be hung on the beak of Governor Newsom if he plans to run for president, because the political line is that he'll want to Californiate the United States. And,
exactly, yeah.
And we can't do this. I love the state, born and raised there. I mean, I worked in the media. I worked for the Sacramento Bee Company. I mean, that's where I cut my teeth in media. And the thing of it is, when you see this one state rule or one party rule, and by the way, we have it in Oregon. I mean, Oregon's a reflection of Sacramento.
Yeah.
And it's serious business, and we're not attracting business, we're losing business. You just got to wonder, sooner or later, it's going to hit the wall, and hopefully we have the fortitude to stand up.
Right. At a certain point, I mean, you can only tax even this 1% or 10% only so much. Like, you could tax them 100% and still be in a deficit because of the spending.
Right.
So you're right. Like, there is a reckoning coming.
All right. Thank you, friend. Get the book, folks. It's called Failed State. There's a picture of the cover of the book. Check out Chris's website, chrismoritz, moritz.com. And look forward to having you back. Thanks for your time. Stay in the fight, buddy.
You're right. California is worth fighting for.
Yep. Stay in the fight.
Thank you.